Emma sat on the edge of the hotel bed, her silk honeymoon robe slipping from her shoulders as she stared at her phone. The screen glowed faintly in the dim light of the room, illuminating the unexpected and jarring text message that had unraveled the pristine fairy tale she thought she was living. It was an anonymous number, one she didn't recognize. The words were sharp and succinct. "You don't know him like you think you do. Check his phone. Ask him about the late-night flights." Her heart pounded like a drumbeat in her chest, each pulse echoing louder in her ears. Her fingers trembled as she reread the message, dissecting its meaning, questioning its purpose. Was this some kind of cruel prank? A joke? But the words struck a chord she couldn't ignore. Jake, her husband of just 48 hours, was in the shower, the sound of running water muffling everything else in the room. The steam spilled from the bathroom door, curling in soft tendrils around her like an invasive presence. Her gaze shifted to his phone on the nightstand. It was face down, untouched, and yet it felt as though it was staring back at her, daring her to make a move. No, she whispered to herself. She wasn't that kind of person, was she? But the text had planted a seed, one that was quickly growing into an unshakable urge to know. A sudden crash of a shampoo bottle hitting the floor startled her, and she bolted upright. Her pulse spiked. Jake laughed from the shower, a casual, unbothered sound, and her stomach twisted at how normal he seemed. How could someone who loved her so deeply, who promised her forever, hide anything? But what if he wasn't hiding? What if he was? Her bare feet padded across the carpet as she approached the nightstand, her movements cautious, deliberate. She snatched up his phone and sat back down, her heart in her throat. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the locked screen. Then, muscle memory kicked in, his birthday. She tried the code. The screen unlocked, and her breath caught in her chest. She felt like a trespasser as she swiped through his apps, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Nothing. Texts between them were sweet and warm, just as she remembered. Work emails were dry and uneventful. She started to feel foolish, paranoid. Then she saw it, a ticket confirmation buried deep in his email, dated 3 days before their wedding. A round-trip flight. Departing late one evening, returning before dawn the next. A single name was listed alongside his, Claire Adams. The room spun. Claire Adams. It was a name she knew all too well, though she had never met the woman. Jake had mentioned her before, always with a tinge of discomfort. His old friend from college, he swore, was nothing more. Her breath quickened as she searched for more. A trail of emails and texts unfolded before her, seemingly innocent on the surface, but layered with subtext that made her stomach churn. Mentions of catching up and keeping things between us. Then, one text. "Don't worry. She'll never know." The sound of the shower stopped, and the silence that followed was deafening. Emma's hand flew to her mouth as her mind raced. She set the phone down as quietly as possible, her movements frantic yet precise. The bathroom door creaked open, and Jake emerged, towel around his waist, his damp hair dripping. He grinned at her, his eyes soft with love, or what she once thought was love. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her pale face and rigid posture. She forced a smile, her chest tight, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "Yeah. Just jet lag," she said, her voice betraying her turmoil. But inside, Emma was a storm. She had cancelled their honeymoon plans that morning, telling Jake she felt too overwhelmed and wanted to reschedule for a later date. Now, she knew she couldn't wait. Tomorrow, she would confront him. And she wasn't ready for what might come next. Emma barely slept. The hours passed in a haze of relentless thoughts, the room feeling colder and more oppressive with each tick of the clock. She couldn't look at Jake the same way anymore. His peaceful, oblivious slumber beside her only deepened her resentment. By morning, her resolve had hardened into steel. She didn't want this shadow hanging over her any longer. Jake stirred awake, stretching lazily as sunlight spilled through the curtains. "Morning, Mrs. Dalton," he murmured, his voice warm and tender. The sound of her new name felt like a taunt. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a tight smile. "Morning." He leaned over to kiss her, but she turned her head slightly, and his lips landed on her cheek. He pulled back, frowning. "Something wrong?" She hesitated, her stomach knotting as she tried to gather her thoughts. This wasn't how she imagined her marriage beginning, with suspicion, betrayal, and secrets. But she couldn't carry this weight any longer. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Jake's brows furrowed. "Sure. What's going on?" She inhaled deeply, her hands twisting in her lap. "Last night, I saw something on your phone." The color drained from his face. His reaction was instant, visceral, and Emma knew then that the text she'd received wasn't a cruel prank. It was the truth waiting to unravel. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tight. "Don't play dumb, Jake," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger now. "I saw the emails. The ticket. Claire Adams." He sat up straighter, his expression a mix of shock and fear. "You went through my phone?" "Yes, I did," she shot back. "And you know what? I'm glad I did. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't know that my husband, the man who swore to love me, was sneaking around with another woman." Jake ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. "Emma, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" she scoffed, her voice rising. "Because it looks an awful lot like you've been lying to me." "Who is Claire to you, Jake? And don't you dare tell me she's just a friend." Jake opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His hesitation spoke volumes. "Say something," Emma demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look. Claire and I have history. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Emma's laugh was bitter, hollow. "You were meeting her 3 days before our wedding, Jake. That's not complicated, that's betrayal." "I wasn't sneaking around," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "She reached out to me. She was going through a rough time, and I..." "You what?" "Felt sorry for her? Decided to comfort her behind my back?" God, Jake, do you hear yourself? Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "It wasn't like that," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't think it mattered." Emma's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Didn't matter? Jake, you lied to me. You hid this from me. And you think that doesn't matter?" For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Jake stared at her, his face a mask of regret. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have told you. But I swear, nothing happened between me and Claire. I love you, Emma." His words hung in the air, heavy and unconvincing. Emma wanted to believe him, desperately, but the cracks in their relationship felt too wide to bridge. She stood abruptly, her legs shaky but determined. "You know what, Jake? I'm not sure I believe you. And I'm not sure I can trust you anymore." "Emma, please." "No," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "I need space. I need time to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with all of this." Without another word, she grabbed her bag and walked out of the room, leaving Jake sitting there, stunned and silent. As the door closed behind her, Emma felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and an unfamiliar sense of freedom. She didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain, she wasn't going to let herself be a victim. She had choices to make. And this time, they would be on her terms. Emma checked into a small bed and breakfast on the other side of town, a quaint place with ivy-covered walls and a quiet garden. She needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere far away from the stifling tension of that hotel room. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sorrow, disbelief, but beneath it all, a spark of determination began to glow. She wasn't going to let Jake's betrayal define her. After unpacking a few essentials, she sank into the room's armchair, staring at her phone. She hadn't replied to Jake's frantic messages, which ranged from desperate apologies to pleas for her to come back so they could talk things through. But she wasn't ready for another confrontation. Not yet. Instead, she reopened the email chain she'd discovered on his phone, combing through every detail, every word. One particular exchange caught her attention, a reference to a payment Jake had made to Claire. It was vague, but something about it felt off. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just an old flame reconnecting. She forwarded the email to herself, then took a deep breath and called her best friend, Lily. "Emma?" Lily's voice was laced with concern. "What's going on? You're supposed to be on your honeymoon." Emma's voice cracked as she recounted everything, the anonymous text, the emails, the confrontation. By the time she finished, Lily was fuming. "That scumbag," Lily spat. "You did the right thing leaving." "But Em, what are you going to do now?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "But I need answers. And I need to know if I can trust him, or if I even want to." "Do you want me to come over?" Lily offered. "No," Emma said after a pause. "I need to handle this myself." She ended the call and stared out the window, watching the rain drizzle against the glass. Her mind churned with possibilities. Then, an idea struck her. She picked up her phone again, this time searching for Claire Adams on social media. It didn't take long to find her. Claire's profile was public, filled with photos of her glamorous lifestyle. Scrolling through, Emma's breath hitched. There, nestled among photos of parties and vacations, was a picture of Claire with Jake, taken just days before the wedding. The caption read, "Some people are worth crossing oceans for." Emma's stomach turned. That was it. She couldn't wait for Jake to come clean, she needed the truth now. The next morning, Emma arrived unannounced at Claire's apartment. It was a sleek, modern building in the city's upscale district. Her heart pounded as she rang the doorbell. The door opened, revealing Claire in a silk robe, her expression shifting from surprise to recognition. "Emma," she said, her tone cautious. "What are you doing here?" Emma stepped forward, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "I need answers, Claire. And I think you owe me that much." Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was as polished as its owner, but Emma had no time to appreciate the decor. She turned to face Claire, who folded her arms defensively. "I know about the emails," Emma began. "The ticket. The money Jake sent you. I need to know the truth." Claire's eyes widened, then softened with something that almost resembled pity. "Emma, I'm not proud of what happened. But you deserve to know." She motioned for Emma to sit, then sank into the chair opposite her. "Jake and we were involved, years ago. He ended it when he met you, but when I found out about the wedding, I wasn't over him. I reached out, and he agreed to meet me. I wanted closure, but..." "But what?" Emma pressed. Claire sighed, her gaze dropping. "I asked him to help me financially. I've been struggling, and I used his guilt to get what I needed." Emma felt a surge of anger. "So you manipulated him?" Claire's eyes snapped up. "I wasn't the only one at fault, Emma. He didn't have to agree. But he did. And he asked me not to tell you." Emma's chest tightened. The betrayal cut deeper than she imagined. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because I'm done with him," Claire said, her voice firm. "And because you deserve better than someone who keeps secrets." Emma stood, her legs trembling but her resolve strong. "You're right. I do. She left the apartment without another word, stepping into the crisp morning air. Back at the bed and breakfast, she drafted a single message to Jake. I deserve the truth, and I deserve respect. You gave me neither. I'm done. She hit send and felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, her path felt clear. Emma didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would face it on her own terms, stronger and wiser than before. And that was a honeymoon gift she gave herself. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.